Hi, my name is Suba Xavier. I'm the interim director of the Institute of African Studies this year. And I'm really delighted to present our this lecture. This is our first Africa-based scholar lecture. We have 3 of these this year. And I want to thank the Dean's Office for the funding, the very generous funding to make this happen. So we're beginning, and this is our inaugural lecture, so thank you for being here. This lecture is also being co-sponsored by the Department of African American Studies, of English, of the program in Global Postcolonial Studies, and the Department of Philosophy. So thank you to all of you who have contributed to this talk. And I'm going to now give the mic over to my colleague from English, Nathan Sir-Seitzma, who's going to do the introduction of Dr. Afolayan.
Hey, good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. I think we're in for a treat. Dr. Adeshina Afolayan is professor and head of philosophy at the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, where I was lucky enough to meet him more than a dozen years ago. The ethicist Nimi Wariboko has referred admiringly to Professor Afolayan's oeuvre as demosophy. I can't even say the word, demosophy, the wisdom of the people. So his monograph, Philosophy and National Development in Nigeria, published by Routledge in 2018, investigates the possibility of a truly Nigerian philosophy in place, engaged with ordinary Nigerians' predicaments. In his account, such philosophy has hitherto been hampered by Nigeria's political economy, by philosophical emphasis on Africa writ large, and the global dominance of Western epistemologies. Much of that monograph was written during a sabbatical that Professor Afolayan spent in the Atlanta area, and during which he previously visited Emory. This was back in 2017. Seems like half a lifetime ago. Professor Afolayan is also a cultural critic whose interests encompass Nollywood film and popular music. In the past half-dozen years alone, he has co-authored with Professor Toyin Falola a book called Fela Anikulapo Kuti, Afrobeat Rebellion and Philosophy, published in 2022 by Bloomsbury. And he has edited or co-edited numerous volumes, literally too many for me to list out today, but here are some highlights. They include the Palgrave Handbook of African Philosophy, Pentecostalism and Politics in Africa, Pathways to Alternative Epistemologies in Africa, and most recently, Global Health, Humanity, and the COVID-19 Pandemic. A Founders Fellow at the National Humanities Center in North Carolina for 2023 to 24, he is at work on a project entitled Philosophy in the Dance Hall, Philosophy and Popular Music in Postcolonial Nigeria, of which his talk today is a part. Please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Afolayan back to Emory.
Thank you very much, everybody. It is so heartwarming to have this number of people here. And I want to thank you so much for coming. I want to thank Suba and Nathan. Like he said, we've been friends for so many years. And that's a story for another day. He's my brother. And I think I'm more than willing now to adopt, or for Suba to adopt me as a friend and brother. Thank you so much. I know there's so many people that have visited Nigeria who will understand some of the things that I will be saying here. And thank you all for coming. Let me put on the table the usual excuses that, and I'm hoping the excuses will save me from a whole lot of questions, even though I want your questions. Like Nathan said, this is part of my larger projects. And these was very challenging for me to write. And it was challenging because usually African philosopher, because of the academic straight-jacketed way of research and this self-absorption, you know, that most contemporary African philosophers inherited from Western philosophy, find it very difficult following the Frankfurt School, from Adorno to Okema and the rest of them, to consider popular culture something very significant that could yield insights. And so in that first book that Nathan referenced, I took a radical point of trying to see how I could break free from my training, from my undergraduate to my postgraduate, which was essentially in Western philosophy. From my first year to my last year, I had just about 3 or so courses that had the prefix of African, to them, and it took much of personal reading, some, things that I had to read for myself, to be able to see that philosophy, yes, could do abstract reflection, yes, but philosophy could do so much more. If you permit me to quote John Dewey says, so far, even in the West, philosophers have been concerned with relating with one another, writing books, writing essays, and to quote him, trying to deal with the problems of philosophy professor. And that we can begin to recover or rescue philosophy when it begins to deal with the real problems of human. So these are part of where I took my initiative from, my inspiration, and that is what led me to popular music in Nigeria, and essentially to somebody like Brymo. So today I'll be introducing you to Brymo, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to make the points that are very, very crucial for the arguments. Now, I'll be looking essentially at Brymo's Yorùbá songs. Brymo has, like I'm going to show soon, has so many albums, but for this work, I've decided to just look at his Yorùbá songs. And that is part of the difficulty of writing this, because I assume that the author is dead, so I deliberately did not, contact him. And they are difficult. I mean, these are celebrities, these are stars. It's so difficult to reach out to them to be able to, seek for an interview or so. But this is from one of his songs, and as I'm going to show later, it gives me an insight. It's like a summary of his dark vision, and part of the difficulty is trying to get what he has to say and translating, not looking for equivalencies, but trying to give a sense of what the song means, and this is it. I mean, if you look at it, you see that it's a very dark vision. We emanated from darkness, and we are going to be returning to darkness. So I'm not going to waste time here. Afrobeat with an S derived from Fela's militant political music. For those of us who are familiar with Fela, that's Fela Anikulapo Kuti, and since he died in the early or so 90s, you've had so many young artists who took inspiration. There are some of them who deliberately, like Burna Boy, for those of you who have heard of Burna Boy, they took inspiration from Fela, they have creatively and recreatively, adapted, appropriated his song, his lyrics, his symbolism, his ideological orientation, so that is where Afrobeats derives from. Now, this is just a short bio, and I've just taken those 20 Yoruba songs from his studio albums. I've deliberately not looked at the collaborative album because, I mean, he's singing with somebody and you might not be able to say that this is his idea. Okay, so here, and I'm not sure I know how to, but with those 2 YouTube videos, I would just like to give us a sense, for those of us who are not familiar with Afrobeat, it is just to give us a sense. I would have loved to just allow you to enjoy, revel in it, but just to give us a sense of what Afrobeat is and the stars, some of the stars that you're allowed to shake your head. tap your feet and just enjoy it. It's a long shot, but I'm not going to be able to. Could you please help me? I'll just be skipping. Just move forward a bit. A bit. That's Tiwa Savage. She's often referred to as the queen of Afrobeat. In Afrobeat, you have just few women that are, if you want to count, maybe about 4, 5, or 6. It's a male-dominated. Okay, maybe that's next one. Okay, so that is Brymo. After his first eat, this is the next one that actually brought him onto the space, and I'm going to be making a point about, so I want you to have a sense of his voice, and this was a period when, according to him, it was still within the mainstream of Afrobeat, but now it seems to have been displaced. I'm putting that displaced in inverted comma. It seems to have been displaced from, within that field, but when he sang Ara, it was still within that spot where you find Davido, where you find Olamide, where you find all the stars. All these symbolisms are significant for the arguments I'm going to be making later. So you see some, element of traditional, that's the Yoruba man dancing the bata. The bata is the traditional Yoruba drum, So you have all those elements of traditionalism that I'm going to be, arguing about in this. That's the bata dancer. That's the Eyo masquerade. That's a famous Eyo masquerade in Lagos State. It's a traditional masquerade, Thank you very much. We could be here all day just enjoying the music, but let's do something. So my question is, why go for Brymo out of this A list? And why go for Brymo? Because is not in the mainstream of Afrobeats, you know. It's not somebody we want to invite to the Madison Square Garden or to New York or anywhere here, to the same way you invite Burna Boy, the same way you invite Rema, you know, all these A-list stars. Is not, so why Brymo? And then why is Yoruba song? Why not the entire musical output? Well, since I'm not doing a PhD again, I'm thinking I just have to limit my what I'm able to do. So, and this is like the argument I'm making. I'm saying that it seems to have been displaced, which is why I'm putting it in scare quotes. It seems to have been displaced. You can't say that it's making money or has commercial success the same way others are doing it, you know. And I'm also referring to a certain politics of exclusion. You know, if I'm a promoter and I need to bring somebody that will give me a return on my investment, Brymo is not somebody I'm going to go to. I'll pick Davido, I'll pick Wizkid, you know, I'll pick all the those who are in the mainstream. So I'm saying that being displaced or being at the margin does not necessarily mean that you are something is wrong with you. Okay, it could actually be, which is what he is claiming. It could actually be a place for you to make a difference. It is actually something you deliberately did, which is what is, if you look at, this is one of his interview in 2022, and that is the key. When he was in his 20s, 25, you know, he said they were doing all this, you know, they were being vain. And that's interesting because recently, Burna Boy granted an interview, and in that interview, did you see that interview with Zane Lowe? He said he said Afrobeat is about lacks substance. And that is the Afrobeat that threw in hop, you know, the same Afrobeat that threw Brymo hop. But for him, he said it's just about it lacks substance. And that's interesting, you know, that's something that threw you, something that gave you, you know, the status that you have now is no longer, you know, and that is the point Brymo was making here, that it is at 35, it is as if society is saying, you need to leave, you need to stop doing all those vanity. You need to stop getting laid, like you said. You need to stop drinking and all that, you know. Being committed to what I consider to be the three elements of, I think, hip hop, even in the United States. It is either about sex and drug, it's about fame, it's about wealth, you know. If you look at all those singing in Afrobeat, it is about getting rich very quickly, you know. And so that is his point, that even though he's in the margin, he's there because of the need to make better music. And so the reason why I decided to go for him, the reason why I've decided to, you know, study his Yoruba songs is what I call the aesthetics of neotraditionalism, you know. And so for me, outside of that theme of sex and wealth and fame and the need to just get, you know, money and you know, Brymo, in fact, his entire musical output is an attempt to confront the postcolonial experience. And this is a postcolonial experience that actually threw him up, you know. He's an only son. He lived with his parents, you know, and he lived in a place called Okokomaiko. Okokomaiko is a slum, and that is where he developed. And it was that slum that gave him, you know, the street wisdom that enabled him to be able to make it to be able to sing back to his experience, to be able to say things, you know, that majority of Nigerians, you know, who live in the ghetto too, will be able to relate with. So for me, that is my idea. In African studies, in African philosophy, you have that attempt to theorize modernity and tradition, and theorizing it as if they are poles apart, you know, as if they are not interwoven and interconnected. But in popular culture, especially if you are following somebody like Karim Baba, you see, attempt to look at popular culture and see how, they are intertwined, that it does not make any theoretical sense to separate tradition from modernity, that they are always, intertwined. In fact, Baba's research into the Yoruba traveling theater, reveals that these people consider themselves to be modern. They consider themselves to be modern, even though they have a mooring in their cultural heritage. So with that, you begin to see. So that is what I am looking at. And I said I adapt this concept to a cultural sensibility that instrumentalizes modern expressive forms and technologies to carry the burden of traditional artistic, didactic, and philosophical imperative that will allow us to be able to make our way through our post-colonial predicaments. Now, that is where my intention with this project I'll be doing at the National Humanities Center, to see that, or to argue that popular culture seems to have found a way to make sense of these post-colonial predicaments. But African philosophy is lagging behind, because almost all the time, and I made that argument vigorously in the first book that Nathan mentioned, almost all the time, we are always in like an echo chamber, just writing for promotion, writing for just publishing, and just doing all those, So, but we have to. My argument is that Nigeria plural existence constitutes a philosophical laboratory for African philosophers. Something to enable us to make sense of our experience, our life world, and that is what, for me, the music of Brymo enables us to do. Now, while writing it, it suddenly just struck me that in thinking about neotraditionalism, I don't know how many people have come across this sculpture, this Nigerian sculpture. It is titled The Yoruba Man with a Bicycle. And in 1987, the San Diego Museum of Arts, James Baldwin was one of the co-curators. And on citing this sculpture, that was what he said, almost spontaneously. This is something, this has got to be contemporary. He's really going to town. He's very jaunty, very authoritative. His errand might prove to be impossible. He's challenging something, or something has challenged him. He's grounded in the immediate reality by the bicycle. He's apparently a very proud and silent man. He's dressed sort of polyglot. Nothing looks like it fits him too well. And honestly, very interestingly, there are some of those words that Baldwin spoke then that fits Brymo and what I consider him to be doing with his Yoruba song. So I see, so those three items that I've identified down there is challenging something. Brymo's songs, enable us to challenge our post-colonial experience. It enables us to speak to how we live, what we are, who we are, and what we have the capacity to become eventually, And by using his music, the music technologies, the media technologies, and what we saw in that music clip that I showed earlier, is attempting to pass across, is grounding himself in that immediate post-colonial present, And as I'm going to prove eventually, you will not find any longing for a utopia in Brymo's song. In fact, I consider it to be what we can call fractured sense of utopia. There is none. In fact, given what I said earlier about, that quote, which I'm going to return to, it is very dark. If somebody says that he perceives that we came from darkness and we are going to return to darkness, then there is no hope for, a flourishing utopia within that vision. So I see that similarity between Brymo and the man with the bicycle. And so between Appiah, and then Appiah took up that challenge, of annotating what James Baldwin said. And that for him is how we can begin to make, it doesn't matter who made the bicycle. It doesn't matter where the music technologies and the media technology came from, as far as Brymo is concerned. What is important is that we'll be able to use these technologies, in ways that enable us to moor ourselves within our cultural heritage, to be able to stay rooted, and not just be lost in, modernity. So I was referring to Karim Berber earlier on, and that was a description of the Yorùbá traveling theater practitioner, that they consider themselves essentially modern, but invested in the wisdom and the law of our people, and especially our elders. That gives us a core of how we can begin to characterize, what Brymo intends his Yoruba song to achieve within the vast chasm that the post-colonial experience has become for most people in Nigeria. So I hope to be able to demonstrate how Afrobeat as a popular aesthetic form inserts itself into the understanding of Nigeria and Africa's post-colonial context and its many morbid symptoms. With morbid, I'm just quoting Antonio Gramsci, the post-colonial experience has so many morbid symptoms, poverty is just the least of them, okay? And then this manifests in his Yoruba songs, and I'm going to be looking at all this. And I see Brymo struggling to make sense of that reality in Nigeria, and how we could make sense of that reality through the conceptual framework that the Yoruba culture and experience and language affords us, okay? And it does this by interjecting the Yoruba social and cultural moral wisdom and philosophical musing into the dense post-colonial surface of modern Nigeria. Now, let me just do a little bit of, I do not want to bore us with all the theoretical underpinning of, the challenge that crafting a theoretical framework for post-colonial aesthetics has remained for post-colonial studies and for post-colonial theorists, And the challenge is, to what extent can we run with Immanuel Kant's understanding of what aesthetics is, And how can we bring that understanding of aesthetics as just being textual into the understanding of post-colonial or post-coloniality that is essentially grounded in the post-colonial experience? How can we begin to talk about textual relation or intertextuality when, what we call the post-colonial experience is an experience of oppression, is an experience of subjugation, is an experience of suffering? How do we relate? So when we talk about a post-colonial aesthetics, in what sense can we say that enables us to make sense of the post-colonial predicament? That is a debate that is still ongoing in post-colonial studies, And so to insert Brymo into a post-colonial study becomes a bit problematic for so many post-colonial theorists, But that is what essentially I am attempting to do, that with his aesthetics of neotraditionalism, we can begin to chart a path that if eventually we come to an agreement, this is one of the paths that we can, or this is one of the directions that we can go. Secondly, post-colonial theory or post-colonial studies has neglected popular culture, especially popular music. Even though you have so many of the theories that are interested, Edward Said has been interested in music, or was interested in music, and so on. But popular music has not been something that is deemed to be worthy of, serious study, to be able to insert it within post-coloniality. So that is the second fundamental gap that I see in post-colonial study. So this is where Brymo makes an entry. As a mean, there's an interesting book by Janet Wilson and some other people, and it is titled Rerouting Postcolonial Studies. That's the title of the collected edition. So I am arguing that with Brymo and what we can make out of him, we have a mean of rerouting and rerouting the postcolonial, as well as rethinking postcolonial aesthetics out of his discursive thesis. You know, you have so many essays and articles that have been written about whether the idea of a postcolonial aesthetics make any sense, okay? So with this aesthetics of neotraditionalism, we can begin to take seriously the root etymology of aesthetics, which is aesthesis. That is where that word comes from the Greek, you know, and it is about ground. It is not what Kant taught when he was defining, you know, what aesthetics mean. You know, with aesthesis, you are grounding, you know, aesthetic assessment, aesthetic appreciation in feeling and in senses, you know, and you are connecting it with what the people are doing and how they see art and art forms. So I'm hoping that if we go the way of looking at, you know, what popular music or popular culture can yield, we will have a way of returning to that, you know, first understanding or the initial lexical understanding of what aesthetics is all about. And so what I've decided to call the critique of postcoloniality is what I consider Brymo as a neo-traditional to be doing. I'm situating him within a border space of a shifting and complicit relationship between history and memory, tradition and modality, and the local and the global. So if we are following that path, you know, that will, I am hoping, enable us to begin to conceive of a postcolonial aesthetics, then Brymo enables us to begin to see how we can begin to rethink the relationship between history and memory and, you know, the local and the global. In this border space, the postcolonial is not perpetually speaking back to empire, which is one of that dangerous thing that some postcolonial theorists have been doing, you know. It is always about how do we respond, especially in postcolonial literature, how do we speak back, you know, to empire. I am saying that with what I'm calling the critique of postcoloniality, we do not need to always speak back to empire, but rather there must be the interrogation of the circumstances, exigencies, and the possibility of the postcolonial that are oriented towards the future from the genealogies of the past and the articulation of the present. How do we move from now and move forward? How do we go from the postcolonial present and begin to make progress? Of course, we might not be able to totally neglect coloniality, you know, which is embedded in our way of life and all that. But that is not to say that we need to always speak back to empire every time. So the critique of postcoloniality demands that the postcolonial world must come to its own self-understanding through grappling with the materiality of postcolonial conditions, rather than always, you know, acting within the shadows and the circumstances of empire. You know, it was interesting yesterday, like I told Nathan, I met a class, a postcolonial studies class. And the students were so brilliant, you know, asked me questions that took me time to reflect about. I was just, you know, introspecting. And one of the questions, you know, that came is, because I was arguing from the point of Jean-Paul Sartre's, you know, being for others and how the African continent can become a being for itself. And the question is, how do we do that? How do we do this? How do we move from the post-colonial present to a future that will be enabling, you know? And the challenge is, once we begin to do that from individual nation states, how do we achieve that Pan-African solidarity that will give, you know, Africa a sense of its own worth when individual African states are dealing with the Bretton Woods institution, with IMF, you know? So if individual states are negotiating with China. I think last year or 2 years ago, China took over the airports in Zambia because Zambia defaulted, in his payments of the debts. And you understand? And I was saying in that class that some years ago, Manley, I think Robert Manley or so, former president of Jamaica, made a claim or put forward a proposal that debtor nations should band together so that you can renegotiate, the terms of payments of your debts. So if you look at it from that perspective, it's scary. It's as if this is just theory, and we might not find a time where we'll be able to, go through this critique of postcoloniality and achieve, an understanding of the materiality of our postcolonial experience. But we are humanities scholars, and we must theorize, okay? So I'll give a very condensed. I would have loved to, like I said, it was so tasking interpreting those Yoruba songs. I would not have had the same problem with looking at the English songs, but interpreting, trying to get a sense of, singing about, and the wonderful thing about Brymo is that those songs are in what we call Ijinle Yoruba. Ijinle is Yoruba word for depth. It's deep. So for the Yoruba, for instance, standard Yoruba orthography will take, we have this, Nathan is familiar. I gave Nathan Amala when he was with me. It's like a pudding made from yam flour. It's called Amala. It's black, but you also have you love it? Ah! you also have the white form, but the deep Yoruba, which is Oyo Yoruba, the Yoruba that the Oyo people speak, will not call it Amala. They will call it Oka. And it is that deep Yoruba that Brymo, sings. He's not going to do the standard orthography. He's going to go to the deep, Yoruba language, So all the 20 Yoruba songs that I sampled, and that is the list that I have there, it's an attempt to, project, that deep Yoruba cultural heritage. Now, that title, Looking into the Glass Darkly, for those who are in theology, you immediately recognize that from the Bible. That's the way I think that Brymo is looking into the future. That from that song that I gave you a snippet earlier on, is looking darkly, or is seeing darkly, okay? So, now, he's not only attempting to weave a traditional sensibility into a tapestry of modern existential challenges, he is also trying to make sense of this cultural framework from the perspective of his entanglement in the modern, which is the essence of my saying that is neo-traditional. He's not simply just saying, from the perspective of the traditional, everything modern is bad. No. In fact, there is a concept of Olaju. Olaju literally means the opening of the eyes to see. And the way the Yoruba deploy that concept is to say that when you see that, for instance, when you are in the presence of an elder among the Yoruba, you are supposed to, if you are a woman, you are supposed to kneel down. If you are a man, you are supposed to prostrate fully, But now, with Olaju, with the opening of the eyes to see, you no longer prostrate. You no longer kneel. In fact, you have some kind of brutally abbreviated greeting. You simply just, how are you, sir? How are you, sir? It is anathema. It is a tragedy for a younger person to bring out his hand to greet an elderly person. So if if you are relating with me, for instance, and then you say, "How are you, sir?" I consider it to be an insult. Please, you can shake me. It's considered to be an insult. So Brymo is not standing on the perspective of the traditional and judging the modern. That's not what he's doing. So yes, he's saying, yeah, from this perspective, for instance, I won't be able to show you that song where the song is blatantly sexual, but he coded it in a way that you will not know that he was referring to a sexual incident. And the song started by saying, I don't have a good voice, so pardon me. You said I should pour water on my body. You said I should sit down. You made me as comfortable as possible. Then you gave me a hot meal of amala, the amala I referred to earlier on. You said, once I finish this, I can ask for another one. And you said, once I finish doing this, I can request for another one. Then the English version of it, and I said that is the only song out of all the Yorùbá, the 20 Yorùbá song where a code switched, just a tiny bit. And then he said, baby, baby, now so you they do me. That's how you do to me. That thing you did before, I like the feeling. Now, that thing you did, and I like the feeling, is the only indication you will have that Brymo was talking about a sexual encounter. Now, that is how a traditional Yoruba person will. So that makes him different from the explicit obscenity that you find in Afrobeat today, that talks about different parts of the female body that, well, for feminists, that objectifies, the female body, So, but within the perspective of the traditional, you have to be very careful. You do not just talk about the female body. You do not talk about, you don't talk, there's this, I call it some kind of restrained prudishness, You just don't talk about body parts. You make allusion, You just make, and Brymo uses the allusion of having a good meal to refer to a sexual encounter. So from that perspective, but in those songs, there is also an attempt to make sense of the traditional setting from, it's just 37 years, and the wisdom, the Yoruba cultural wisdom he got from his parents, and so he's also trying to make sense of that traditional Yoruba culture from his perspective as a modern guy. So you begin to see how his reflections enables us, and that is what I did with the analysis of all those songs. So for him, we can gaze, okay, that point, in those 20 songs, you will not find the need to define himself culturally, that I'm a Yoruba person, I'm traditional. No, he didn't do that. And again, there is no longing for a picture of a future that is rosy, that is a utopia. There is none of those things. So he's situated in that in-between space that enables him to draw on the traditional and the modern. And so with this, we can only gaze into what I call the penumbra of possibilities and contingencies as we make sense of, our modern, post-colonial predicament. We can only keep gazing. There is nothing beyond it that enables us to, there is no heaven, the biblical heaven. There is no nirvana, anywhere. So this is the song. Yes. I would like you to just have a feel of, it's called Okunkun. Okunkun is darkness in Yoruba. How come you hide your words from me? Every word may set me free. Only love remains from it. No one else can set me free. Life is a journey. We came from darkness. I am arguing that we can take this song, Darkness, as the central core that gives us a sense of what Brymo's vision is all about. And from this, we can begin to move out into, for instance, some of those songs are concerned with the individual community relationship. In African philosophy, you have so many essays now that examines what is called African communitarianism, you know. And you have those you call the extreme communitarian who believe that you do not have any individual sense of self except you are located within, you know, that communal space. But you have the moderate communitarians who believe that no, yes, even though the community supersedes, you know, but you still have individuals, you know, some could be deviant. For those who, you remember Efushetu Aniwura, you know, that solid woman in 19th century Yorùbá land, who challenged the authority of the Alaafin, who challenged the patriarchal domination of the chiefs, you know. But eventually, as is usual, she died, you know. She was persecuted by the chiefs who were doing the same thing she was doing. They owned slaves. She owned slaves too. But because she was a woman, it was not right for her to own slaves, you know, and all that. And so you have individual creativity, you have individual initiatives, you know, that could sometimes challenge the communitarian, the community, you know. And so, you know, that divide, you know, between the individual and the community in African philosophy is also something that Brymo challenged, you know. And he was doing this from the perspective of what I call negative sociality. Like you can see from here, his anchoring is, I don't know, I think I stopped, yes. So the premise of the song is simple. We're existentially thrown into the world with no determinate destination. Now, this is contrary to, for those who are familiar with Heidegger, is contrary to, you know, the sense carried by the Da in Dasein, you know, and Dasein tells us of being, a sense of being in the world, you know, being there, entangled in the world, and straining towards a better existence. So from what I've said about Brymo now, there is no straining. There is no better existence, so you just have to keep trying. You are moored within that okunkun, within that darkness, you know. So for Brymo, our current post-colonial existence is darker than the existential allowance for respite afforded by the idea of being thrown into the world, according to Heidegger. We are not sure where we came from. We are thrown from darkness, and we will return to that darkness. But while we are here, while we are still within the challenge, the predicament of our post-colonial experience, the source of authentic existence, what somebody has called in Yorùbá, it is Shishiaye, doing the world, you know, not just being in the world, but doing it, participating in it, you know. That is what gives the self its source of authentic existence. So for him, for Brymo, that authentic existence, that sense of doing the work, lies first in himself. That's why he said, nobody can save me. So for you, my lover, I am not trying to be a savior, because I know that nobody can save me. Nobody can save us. There is no savior, you know, anywhere, okay? So it also lies in the search for truth. And finally, you know, love. You know, sustaining yourself within that context is a fun. So you will find out that in almost all those songs, Brymo is addressing a lover. He's always addressing a lover, which was why he was worried in this song. Why did you keep your word from me, oh my lover? Why is your word hidden from me? Because it is from your care. It is from your embrace. It is from, our talking that we can actually begin to make sense of, the challenges and the predicaments that we find ourselves. So, okunkun, darkness, situates the existential hands that Brymo feels in his lonely and finite subjectivity. It is from that finite, lonely subjectivity that is challenging negative sociality. Remember, Sartre says hell is other people. So in relating with other people, you have to be very careful. But Brymo is also aware that you cannot just be lost in your own self. You need to relate. But there is outside of him, outside of himself, there is that negative social ambience, immediately he left, when he sang that first song that gave him a hit, he was signed on to Chocolate City as, a promoter. But he left the contract, after about 2 hit songs, because of course, as usual, and you'll find that one of them recently died, Mobad recently died, and it was assumed on social media that he was killed by Naira Marley. Naira Marley signed him, on, but the challenge is that once they begin to make hit songs and they are making money, they discover retrospectively that the contract they sign is no longer worth it. And so they want to step out of it. And so the person that signed them, of course, being a business person, will also be, concerned not to lose his investments. So Brymo also had a challenge by stepping out of Chocolate City, the promoter. And so that is part of the negative sociality that he kept referring to in his song, and so with that darkness, we begin to understand how, what Brymo is telling us to do, what Brymo is asking us to. It might not be a good, I don't think it's a good vision, but I don't also think that we must always long for a utopia. Yes, utopia has a way of allowing us to moderate the vicissitude, the twist and the turn of our human existence. But for him, we can only continue to look darkly into the glass, and maybe someday we'll be able to see clearly. I want to thank you so much for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have lots of time, I think, for questions and answers or further questions, as philosophers are wont to provide. So questions, comments?
Oh, okay, my name is Musa Jube. I am from Kankla School of Theology. I was intrigued by the word the darkness, and I wondered what are other translations of that word? Because any translation, will have a variety of meanings. Now, given the way that darkness in the postcolonial history is loaded, and here I don't know if it is used positively, if it reflects something very, a way that is a notion that is very, very indigenous. So I would like to hear more. How would you translate this word? What is really being articulated? I came from darkness, and I'll return to darkness. And I'm just immediately thinking, the dark continent is a very big, yeah. Thank you.
I was going to ask, I'm Diane Stewart. I teach in religion and African American studies. Thank you for coming. I was going to ask, are there also ambiguities that can be explored, especially as we think about the deep Oyo Yoruba that he's speaking, and also even when we think about translation, like what kinds of issues come up with that? Okay.
Thank you very much. Those are beautiful questions. Yes. Okay, yes. So just as I mentioned at the beginning, I struggled a lot with the translation, especially when I got to this, my initial sense was to run with the idea of the void. or chasm. But chasm does not quite gives me the sense. And so what I did, the strategy that I deployed is to see the place of that one word in the entire song, to give me a sense of, so the Yoruba will not say that okunkun is chasm, but it is, can I call it a lexical cognate, And honestly, I think that question keeps me thinking, gives me a sense that maybe I need to, I'll think more about it. But the most immediate translation of okunkun, is darkness for the Yoruba. Blackness is dudu. So when the Yoruba say odudu, they are simply saying you are black. But when they are talking about darkness, it is, when they are talking about okunkun, darkness seems to be, the more appropriate, for me, lexical choice, the translation, So, but I think I'll keep thinking about it to see whether it's something, whether I should go for the void or to just retain darkness. But I understand where that question is coming from. I thank you for it.
Adeshina, we met many years ago, and it's a pleasure to see you back here.
Thank you.
I'm Deepika Bari.
I know.
I'm in the English department. Your discussion of the Yoruba man on the bicycle refreshed my memory of Apia's essay. It is the post in postmodern, the post in postcolonial. And Apia had made the very interesting observation that not every cultural expression out of Africa is beset by the identity, anxieties of identity that we have come to associate with the postcolonial novel in its textual expressions. I thought we were going to see something of the same articulation here, but you went much deeper and further than that. You went not just into existential gerrymandering of the question of existence. You almost went into this, on the one hand, negative space of identity that's associated with postmodern articulations on the one hand. On the other, it seemed to me that you also sort of went into kind of Sufi thinking about identity, where your articulation of the idea of the void as a possible translation for cognitive is the nothing. I'm not. The Sufi articulation can often be, I'm neither wind, nor air, nor fire, nor ashes. So it proceeds by negation. And I wondered to what extent it was philosophy, but the Yoruba world consciousness with its own religious sense of engagement with the elements as both there and crossed over in the ways we've read in Holy Shoinka's work, for example. So this was profoundly enlightening for me, given that it's about darkness. But it was a lovely moment of articulation there, which can possibly only come from the popular space, which is not beset by the anxieties of the argot or jargon of the educated. Very lovely paper. And I remain curious about the religious dimensions of this articulation.
You see, the interesting, thank you, the interesting thing about this is that the last two lines was actually an error on the part of Brymo. Those were not what he intended to sing there, But when he mistakenly put it that way, and then he said he went back, listened to it, and then he loved it. And then he gave philosophers and literary critics problems. So begin to try to unravel what are you trying to say, you know? Thank you very much for that. I think it gives, like I said, you know, the usual excuses at the beginning. This gives me sufficient leeway to, you know, start from that understanding. How should we look at okunkun, especially from the Yoruba traditional perspective? Actually, I attempted to see whether I could ground it in Soyinka's fourth realm, you know, and then I have so many, both of us are familiar with Shola Oloruyomi. I'm not sure whether you know Shola Oloruyomi is the first person who wrote, did a systematic analysis of Fela Anikulapo's Afrobeats. Now is exploring what he calls wombiture, you know, from the word womb, you know. And I was attempting to see, okay, is that a possible way to explain what Brymo was saying, you know, the darkness, the amniotic, you know, darkness in the womb. And so I have so many possibilities, and I promise you I'm going to explore it and see what. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Sonia Wind. I'm from the history department. Thank you, Professor, for this talk. I have two questions. My first question, like, you talk about Yoruba women who challenged Alafin, and I didn't write the name, so I just would like to have the name of this woman. And my second question is related to the comments the professor of the English department made. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but regarding the role of Yoruba cosmology in Brymo world, and even I would say in a post-colonial context, like what could be the role of Yoruba cosmology? Because I think in the lyrics, he said like there is no savior, and we can also think like there is no like Christ anymore. Like, so kind of, it's also like a rejection of colonialism and Christianity. And I know in Africa today, we have many people, they want to go back to the religion of ancestors. And I'm like, what is the role of Yoruba cosmology and beliefs in this context?
And thank you for a wonderful lunch. The name of the woman is Efushetan Aniwura. Efushetan Aniwura. She was a rebel. Okay, but the question is, what could just one woman do in a patriarchal context? And she was the only one, you know, and the literary representation of who she is has always been through, you know, the mouthpiece of the male writer, you know. We have Akinwumi Shola who wrote that, you know, drama. And of course, what do you expect? You know, it has patriarchal coloring. Okay. So as to the second question, I struggle if I could just go back. Now, if you look at that savior, Olubala, who either be rendered as the hero or the savior. Yoruba Pentecostal will see Olubala as a savior. Do you understand? Okay. But for those who have translated, so a whole lot of this I did by myself. I look at, you know, extant translation and I reject them. There are those who translated Olubala as a hero. But there's another word for a hero in Yoruba, you know, it is akoni. You know, akoni literally means somebody who is very strong, you know. So akoni could be the hero. So I decided to go with savior here, you know, and essentially it is because I'm not looking for anyone to save me. You know, nobody can set me free, which is the anxiety he felt that the lover was not speaking with him. that, between me and you and the love that we share, we can maneuver, whatever. So if you keep quiet and I'm no savior and I cannot save myself then, so that is why I went with, that translation. And so within Yoruba cosmology, I am ignorant, now of, I'm going to follow the path that Deepika outlined. But you see, the cosmology is, the Yoruba believe that the entire universe is like a god that is closed. The top one, well, is male, I don't know. And the bottom one is female, and that is what makes up, the universe. And within that universe, you have hierarchies of divinities, both the benign one, the Orisha, and the malevolent one, the Ajogun, and then you have a Shu as the singular divinity that straddles, the divinity of contingencies, that enables the universe to stay in balance, and all that. So that is that. I didn't want to go into that deep because I couldn't find a way to situate Brymo within that context. But the context that, okay, so outside of that God that makes up the cosmology, what do we have? Well, must be the void, But I have not come across a theorization of what that void will accept in Soyinka's fourth realm. Yes.
Thank you so much for, I've been looking forward to this just because I grew up with the whole chocolate city. So I remember when he posted on Twitter that he's leaving Chocolate City, and it was a whole mess, which is my question. So I know you started by saying he's not dead, thankfully, but I do want you to quarrel with him a little, because if his aesthetics of marginalization are central to his work, his marginalization is sort of self-inflicted. Because that's, I'm hoping you can talk about that. Because from where I sit, as someone who listened a lot to Oleku and Ara and so on, it's interesting that he speaks of the hedonism in the Afrobeat scene, which makes sense because the opening lines of Oleku are, I'm so interesting, more verses than a Bible, so on and so forth. It's like, the hedonism is out there. Now, so, and then, he does the whole I'm leaving Chocolate City thing. And so I just want you to push a subject a little bit and so that I can see why I should trust him when he moves away from that hedonism to the neo-traditional of, oh, I'm running away from the hedonism, because to the traditional being Yoruba culture is can in my limited interaction with it, can be intensely hedonistic. African traditional, cultures can be intensely hedonistic in their own right. So I just want to go like, really? That's what you're doing? I hope you can speak to that.
I like that. Thank you very much. Well, I as part of my research, I came across, no, it wasn't part of it. I had to peer review for a journal, an essay, about Afrobeats. And the author attempted to, this question of hedonism. Well, philosophers, you have to be very careful about conceptual analysis, And the author essentially just took hedonism as pleasure seeking, and then neglected all the nuanced conceptual pathway that one word could give you. Okay, but that's just right. So I'm not sure the hedonistic, I'm not sure that that is what Brymo was aiming for by leaving, the mainstream. No, that was, he still enjoys himself. He's still in that ambience of, the Afrobeat person and all that. But I think it is significant, even for somebody like Burna Boy, to challenge the existing framework in Afrobeats that is just, all about making money, making hits. Of course, if you make a hit song, you are going to get your money, But if you are not, which is why almost all of them, Olamide, Naira Marley, and the rest of them now have their own label, So I don't think we could fault him on that regard, that if an existing record deal agreement is not favorable to you, you should leave. Kiss Daniel, that you are familiar with, had to leave GO worldwide, because, but in leaving, he had to forfeit all the hit song that he made under the label, But now, good enough, is making some other hits. So, but for Brymo, leaving, I think it was, I'm not sure whether we can call it a good move, leaving the mainstream for the margin, but I think it's a courageous one, because now, okay, there's somebody called Adekunle Gold. Adekunle Gold started with folklore songs, that was how we started, Orente and all that, and these are songs, but Adekunle Gold knew that if he had continued on that path, there was no way he could keep up, so he reinvented himself, but the reinvention that Brymo did is like, I don't want to use the word backward, but he reinvented himself out of the mainstream that could have given him, the material success that Burna Boy and the rest of them have. I think that's a courageous move, So now he simply just sings, releases album, and do some little, performances here and there. But according to him, he's satisfied. Of course, some other people could read it as somebody who could not keep up, but he sings its song and people are dancing, and he has his own immense followership. In fact, in that essay, I have a footnote where I say that he's persona non grata on social media. The cancel culture is being canceled actually, on social media, so, but he's so courageous as to make that move to respond, according to him, to the dictate of the society that demands from him singing or making better music. That's the way I see it.
Hello, Dr. Adeshina. My name is Ololade Faniyi, and this was a very insightful paper. I was super excited, even though I am a Nigerian feminist and do not like Brymo. Oh yes,
I know that.
Yeah, when you claim to have to sing with female artists to collaborate with them, then you deserve to be cancelled. Yeah. So I was thinking about what you mentioned a couple of slides back about speaking to the empire, and how that has become what makes a lot of Afrobeat artists legible to the West. Thinking of Burna Boy, for instance, and that's why I find it kind of hypocritical that Burna Boy made that statement about the lack of substance of Afrobeats, because there's a running joke about Burna Boy that whenever it's time for Grammy season, that's when he puts on his Martin Luther King and Pan-African aesthetic, because because for instance, you find that albums like African Giants won a Grammy, but Love Da Meaning, which was basically about love and just vibes, did not win a Grammy. And so I was just thinking, if speaking back to the empire is what makes you legible, Brymo finds himself, there's this commercial and critical impossibility of Brymo's music, because he's a loner essentially in the music industry.
I like that word,
yeah. And his behavior doesn't make it doesn't
at all.
And so there's this impossibility of Brymo. It's brilliant, yes, but he finds himself in this impossible cycle that I'm not sure he can ever break out of.
So immediately relate what I call is lonely and finite subjectivity. I don't know whether he brought that on himself. I don't know whether is singing from that position, but that gives him that, philosophical ambience, to project. So yes, he's a crazy guy. I was appalled when I read that news about Simi. Simi is the female artist, and that for both of them to have a collaboration, there must be some kind of intimate relation. Honestly, I don't know where that, and he was able to hone up to it. Is that courage? I don't know, but he was able to hone up to it. And, my children are crazy about Afrobeats. They teach me all these things that I am now bragging about, and they teach me all the dance steps and all that. And when I begin to sing, some gibberish, they laugh at me, but they are not flowing with Brymo, which is why I got my independence from them. I am flowing with Brymo, and I don't know. I think he's deep. And I don't know where he got all those crazy things he says on social media from. But I've had this argument with my children who always say that Burna Boy is arrogant, and I say to them, why not just listen to the music and leave the guy alone? But at a point, which is the essence of what you have just said, is there a point at which is it possible to make that distinction between the personality of somebody and the music that person sings? That's one. Burna Boy is one musician that wants to take on the toga of Fela. That is one person, and if you look through that specific interview with Zenloy, and you look at some of his other, he's always, bringing up whether that is, some kind of opportunistic thing. I don't know, but I don't know whether the author is always dead when you look at some of these things, or you have to, so that would be my response to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the lecture.
Thank you very much.
Ifeolu, I'm in the art history department. My question is, it's not fully formed, and I'm struggling to ask it. But I wonder about
you be a philosopher.
Yeah, you talked about the kind of what the postcolonial novel, which is the kind of place where the postcolonial critique has been located, and how much of that takes it away from the idea of thinking about postcolonial critique in popular culture. But I also wonder about how much of this critique is still happening on the same. What I was thinking about is how, because this is happening deeply at the level of what is happening in the text, how much of this is still pulling back whatever might be happening in the popular back into what can be legible to the postcolonial intellectual, precisely because parts of what makes Afrobeat as style and Afrobeat as form appealing often happens beyond the text. Actually, often bypasses the text entirely. It's often about the sound, often about the production, about the video, and even for Brymo, some of what, I mean, I have my issues with him, but some of that is, I think, the distinction between the popular and the marginal is often mistaken that once we drag down the beats per minute and we set it to the tune of piano, we have suddenly arrived at the margins, which I think often mistakes what precisely might be possible, even in the kind of athletic beats, danceable song. So how much of this is taken, how best can the kind of aesthetics of Afrobeat itself as form and style be included in that which makes whatever Brymo is doing valid as somewhere where we can locate a particular kind of postcolonial aesthetics? By that I'm saying, is it possible to drag the terms of this conversation into the terms that are set by Afrobeat itself, as opposed to the ones that have to be set in the kind of postcolonial critique that intellectuals might be familiar with?
I like that question because so I'm saying that you should find yourself in philosophy. That question is precisely the one I am trying to wrap my head around about with the project that I am looking at, for this fellowship. And the reason is that the two texts that I have that I've in the United States that I've attempted to engage with with hip hop, have only attempted to impose a philosophical, I don't want to use the word arrogance, have attempted to, take hip hop and to tease out philosophical issues. How, for instance, can we take the music of Tupac Shakur as enabling us to answer the issue of maybe what reality is or what the moral condition of humanity is and all that. That is not what I'm attempting to do. I'm not taking Afrobeat as a secondary cultural resource. What I'm attempting to do, or what I'm still trying to figure out, is how we can make African philosophy and Afrobeat dialogic partners, at the level of, cohesiveness. You understand? So I'm not trying to do what the anthropologists did, the colonial anthropologists did for African primitive culture, but I'm trying to say that if and when the African philosopher is coming into contact, or to use the allegory of the cave, if the philosopher is now ready to return into that cave, he's not going, contrary to Plato, he's not going there to convince those who are there that it's time to come and also behold the blinding light of the sun. No, no. He's going back there into that dark. I will have so more because my next attempt is to look at Nollywood, the Nollywood cinema, and see what the African philosopher would feel in that dark, space. So the point for me is, when an African philosopher encounters Afrobeat, what is he encountering? You understand? He's not encountering a secondary source. No, he's encountering something that has his own poetics and something that yields his own philosophical insights. Insights that could enable the African philosopher return to a philosophical disputation and possibly provide leeway for looking at how, some of these questions could be resolved. So for instance, the issue of identity community, individual community, how do we manipulate it? The issue of the consciousness that is embodied in that lonely individual subjectivity that Brymo has been singing about. How does that enable us to begin to think of personal identity or, subjectivity that is a very significant discourse in philosophy? So it is a dialogic cohesiveness, that I'm looking for. I'm not looking for the African philosophy imposing his sophisticated analysis on which, I don't know, I'm hoping I will get that feedback, or I've been getting that feedback. I'm hoping that is not what I have done here. I have not attempted to say, if you look at this line, what Brymo has given us, has added to our debate. No. This is a very humbling essay for me to write, and it is humbling because I am in the face of somebody that we can regard as a philosopher. But I have argued, in fact, I argued in the Research in African Literature, my essay on Abiola Irele, I argued that there is no way we can say that you only become a philosopher through professional training. No, we can't. So in that essay, I attempted to induct him into the African philosophical pantheon. So now looking at, so we can understand Abiola Irele, he was a giant. But Brymo, everybody has issue with Brymo, and yet Brymo is who I'm talking about. I'm, trying to tease out some significant philosophical insights from what his musical output. So that is what I am still trying to see how this project will enable me to do. So this is a first leg forward in that project. And from all that I've been getting, brilliant contributions that I've been getting, I think it will allow me to just do this better. Thank you very much for that question.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And let's Thank you, Professor.